The rooster announces dawn before my alarm clock has a chance. I do not mind. The early hours have always been sacred on this land. The mist rolls across the eastern field, painting everything in silver-gray light. This is my inheritance. This is my responsibility. This is my peace. My grandfather purchased these 60 acres back in 1952, when the town of Mill Creek was nothing more than a general store and a few scattered houses. He built the farmhouse with his own hands, weathered every season, survived every hardship. When cancer took him 3 years ago, his final words to me were simple: "Guard it well, son. Land like this does not exist anymore." I start every morning the same way. Coffee brewed strong enough to stand a spoon in, work boots laced tight, a quick check of the weather app, then out the door before the sun fully crests the hill. The chickens need feeding. The irrigation line needs checking. The north fence always needs mending where the deer push through. By noon, my shirt is soaked through with honest sweat. My hands are calloused and dirt-caked, but I would not trade them for the soft hands of city dwellers. Out here, a man is measured by what he creates, what he maintains, what he protects. I grow corn, beans, and tomatoes. I keep chickens for eggs and a small herd of goats for milk and cheese. It is not a massive operation, but it feeds me and provides enough surplus to sell at the weekend farmer's market. The changes came slowly at first. Mill Creek grew. New housing developments crept outward like fingers of concrete and stucco, reaching from the town center toward the rural outskirts. I watched as farmland was sold off parcel by parcel, transformed into cookie-cutter homes with postage stamp yards. I heard the whispers at the feed store. Old man Jenkins sold his 20 acres to developers. The Miller property was being rezoned for mixed-use residential. A new homeowners association had formed, calling itself Meadowbrook Estates, though no meadow or brook remained after they bulldozed everything flat. It did not concern me. My farm sat 3 miles outside town limits, safely beyond their reach, or so I thought. The envelope appeared on my fence post on a Tuesday. Cream-colored paper with an embossed logo, Meadowbrook Estates Community Association. I opened it while walking back to the house, reading with increasing disbelief. Dear property owner, it has come to our attention that your structure at 4228 County Road does not comply with Community Visual Standards Section 7.3. The unpainted barn, excessive equipment storage, and non-conforming fence lines must be addressed within 30 days. Daily fines of $150 will commence after the grace period. I read it twice, certain it was some kind of joke. I had never joined any community association. My property was not part of any development. This farm predated their precious Meadowbrook Estates by 7 decades. I tossed the letter on the kitchen table and went back to work. That evening, Frank Tolliver, my nearest neighbor a quarter-mile east, came by with his own letter. "You get one of these?" he asked, holding up an identical envelope. I did. I poured him a glass of tea as we sat on the porch. Bunch of nonsense. Frank shook his head. "Not sure it is, James. County Commissioner meeting last month. They approved some rezoning. Never thought it would affect us out here, but these city folks are getting bold." "They can rezone all they want," I said. "This is private property, grandfathered in before zoning laws even existed." "That is what the Hendersons thought too," Frank said quietly. "Remember their place, the old white farmhouse on Miller Road?" I nodded. "Gone now, fined them into submission. They sold last month." A cold feeling settled in my stomach as the sun set over my fields. That night I could not sleep. I stood at my window, looking out at the silhouette of the barn against the moonlight. My grandfather built that barn. His father helped raise those beams. I made a decision then. This farm would not fall. Not to developers, not to some HOA with delusions of grandeur, not while I drew breath. The second letter arrived exactly 7 days after the first. This one was not left on my fence post. This one was hand-delivered by a woman in her early 50s, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her pantsuit pressed to perfection despite the dusty gravel driveway. Mr. Harmon, I am Clarissa Trent, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Community Association. She extended her hand. I did not take it, my own hands dirty from morning chores. This is private property, I said, and I am not part of your association. Her smile never wavered, like it was painted on with the same precision as her makeup. Actually, the recent municipal rezoning places your property within our jurisdiction for community standards enforcement. I wanted to personally discuss the violations noted in our previous correspondence. Behind her, a man in khakis was photographing my barn. Another was measuring the height of my fence posts with a laser device. "Hey," I shouted, "get off my land." Clarissa touched my arm, her manicured nails like claws. "Please understand, we are simply documenting the current status for our files. Your property is now part of our community improvement plan." I stepped back from her touch. "I never signed anything. I never agreed to join your HOA. Membership is automatic under County Ordinance 247B when properties are rezoned into the district." She reached into her leather portfolio and produced a document. This was all covered in the public notice published in the Mill Creek Gazette last quarter. The men continued their inspection, making notes, taking pictures. My dogs barked frantically from the porch, sensing the invasion. "I want everyone off my property, now." I felt my face growing hot. Clarissa sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "I was hoping you would be reasonable. The Henderson property integrated so smoothly after initial resistance." That was when I connected the dots. Clarissa Trent. The name had seemed familiar. She had been the top real estate agent in the county before retiring to pursue community leadership. What she was really doing was clear now, driving down property values through fines and harassment, then swooping in to buy at bargain prices. "I am not the Hendersons," I said quietly, "and this farm is not for sale, not now, not ever." She handed me the second letter. "This is a formal violation notice with attached daily fines. I strongly suggest compliance rather than confrontation, Mr. Harmon. The county board has already approved our expansion." After they left, I drove straight to the county offices. Margaret Wilson had been the county clerk since I was a boy. If anyone would give me straight answers, it would be her. "They did push through some rezoning," Margaret confirmed, her voice low as she pulled up maps on her computer. "Technically, your eastern border now touches the new development zone. They are using that as their foothold." "But they cannot just force me into their HOA," I protested. Margaret looked uncomfortable. "The new ordinance has language about contiguous properties and visual consistency requirements. It is all legal jargon, but they might have legal ground," I finished. "You should talk to a lawyer, James," she said. "And fast. Clarissa Trent has connections at the county level. Her husband plays golf with Judge Simmons every Thursday." I left feeling sick. The system that was supposed to protect property rights had been twisted against those very rights. Back home, I found another paper stuck to my gate. This one detailed daily fines: $150 for non-compliant structures, $75 for improper fencing, $50 for excessive agricultural equipment visible from access road. I did the math. They could bankrupt me in months. That night, I called every farmer within 20 miles. Most had already received similar letters. Some were considering compliance. Others were looking to sell before the fines accumulated. A few, like old George Peterson, told me they would die before painting their barns some ridiculous HOA-approved color. I felt the noose tightening. Clarissa Trent was not just some power-hungry HOA president. She was a predator who had found a way to weaponize municipal codes against people whose families had worked this land for generations. War had been declared. I just did not know yet how I would fight back. The next assault came at dawn, 3 days later. I was feeding the chickens when I heard the metallic snip of wire cutters. Running to the east pasture, I found 2 men in Meadowbrook Estates polo shirts cutting through my barbed wire fence. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" I shouted, my voice carrying across the morning stillness. One man, a balding fellow with sunglasses, looked up calmly. "Removing non-compliant fencing per Section 12 of the notice you received. Barbed wire is prohibited within community boundaries." "This is for my livestock." I moved between them and my fence. "You cannot just cut down working farm fences." "Livestock limitations are covered in Section 14, the second man said, consulting a tablet. "You will need to relocate your animals within 30 days anyway." I physically blocked them from cutting more wire. "Get off my property before I call the sheriff." The first man shrugged. "Go ahead. Sheriff Daniels is fully aware of our enforcement activities." Nevertheless, they retreated to their white SUV with the Meadowbrook logo on the door. I spent the morning repairing the fence, my fingers bleeding from the sharp wire. By afternoon, I had restored the barrier, but my sense of security was shattered. The next day, my mailbox disappeared. Not knocked over, not vandalized, completely removed from its post. When I called the Postal Service, they informed me that they had received official notification that my address was now part of a centralized mail station at the Meadowbrook Community entrance, a quarter-mile from my property. I drove to the sheriff's office immediately. Sheriff Tom Daniels had been in school with my older brother. I expected at least a sympathetic ear. Instead, I found a man unwilling to meet my eyes. "Look, James, this is a civil matter," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The HOA has filed all the proper paperwork." "They cut my fences, Tom. They removed my mailbox without permission. That is trespassing and destruction of property." He shuffled papers on his desk. "According to County Ordinance 247B, they have limited right of access for code enforcement. As for the mailbox, that falls under community standards once rezoning takes effect." "So you are not going to do anything?" I could not keep the incredulity from my voice. "My suggestion: work with them, not against them. Clarissa is very reasonable if you cooperate." I left the sheriff's office knowing I had lost another ally. Later that week, I tried organizing a meeting of affected landowners at my place. Only 6 showed up. The others were too intimidated or had already begun compliance. Old George Peterson spat on the ground when I mentioned Clarissa's name. "That woman bought 30 acres adjoining my south field last year. Been a nightmare ever since. Always finding excuses to be on my land, measuring things, taking photos." We shared stories, made plans to attend the next county meeting as a group, but I could see the resignation in their eyes. They were being worn down, one paper cut at a time. Then came the notice on my barn door, printed on bright orange paper, impossible to miss. "Demolition scheduled. This non-compliant structure will be removed in 14 days per Community Ordinance 33-7. Owner may apply for variance by appearing before the board with approved architectural plans for replacement structure. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. We had been fixing the barn roof one summer when I was 12. "Remember, son," he had said, wiping sweat from his brow, "there will always be polite invaders in pressed shirts, men with papers and rules who never worked the land but think they should control it. Never let them take what we have built." That afternoon, I drove to the city to meet with a lawyer. Harold Bennett listened to my story, reviewed my deed, and examined the HOA documents. His conclusion was grim. "They found a loophole in the county rezoning laws," he said. "Fighting this in court would cost more than the fines they are threatening, and appeals could take years." I left his office with a heavy heart but a resolute mind. If the system would not protect me, I would have to protect myself. The question was how. The morning dawned clear and bright, mocking the darkness that had settled over my life. I had spent a sleepless night researching legal options, calling old friends for advice, even considering selling a parcel to pay for better lawyers. The isolation was wearing me down. Then I saw them, cars turning into my access road. Not one or two, but a dozen. SUVs and luxury sedans with Meadowbrook decals, rolling onto my property as if they owned it. From my porch, I watched in disbelief as people in business casual attire began unfolding chairs on my east field, the very field I had planted with alfalfa just 2 weeks prior. A white tent was erected, tables appeared. A portable speaker system was being set up at the edge of my property, and hovering above it all was a large drone, broadcasting the scene to someone not present. I stormed across the field. "This is private property. You cannot hold a meeting here." Clarissa emerged from the crowd, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and a victorious smile. "Actually, we can. This particular section of land is under dispute according to the county survey markers. We have filed the appropriate notices for temporary use." I never received any notice. My voice rose above the drone's mechanical whine. "It was posted at the community bulletin board as required," she replied smoothly. "Now, if you will excuse us, we have a community meeting to conduct. You are welcome to attend, of course. We will be discussing the final phases of the neighborhood integration plan." A speaker crackled to life, the sound carrying across my fields. The drone dipped lower, its camera focused on me. "Please remove that drone from my airspace," I demanded. Clarissa glanced upward. "That is county airspace, Mr. Harmon, and we have a permit for aerial documentation." I was livid but outnumbered. As I retreated to my house to call my lawyer, I noticed water pooling near my boot. Following the spreading moisture, I discovered they had driven a tent stake through my main irrigation line. Water was gushing out, flooding the field where tender shoots were just emerging. By the time I shut off the water main and returned, the damage was done. Half an acre of new growth was underwater. The HOA meeting continued undisturbed, the drone recording everything, including my increasingly desperate attempts to save my crop. That night, after they finally left, I found my property littered with pamphlets announcing "Community Notice, Non-Cooperative Landowner Presenting Active Hazard to Neighborhood Development. Vote yes on complete acquisition at tonight's meeting." I collected each paper like evidence at a crime scene. My lawyer had not returned my calls. The sheriff would not help. County officials were in Clarissa's pocket. The next morning brought the final straw. My tractor, my grandfather's 1976 John Deere, meticulously maintained for decades, had all 4 tires slashed. The fuel line was cut. On the hood, someone had taped another notice. Equipment violation. Section 8.2, Agricultural machinery must be stored in approved structures, not visible from community access points. I sat beside the disabled tractor, something breaking inside me. Then I heard the bleating. Following the sound to the north pasture, I found 2 of my goats dead. Without the fence repair I had planned to do with the tractor, they had wandered onto the road and been struck by vehicles. That night I climbed into my attic and pulled out a dusty footlocker. Inside were reminders of another life, my 4 years in Army recon before returning to take over the farm. Among the items was a small book of contacts, men I had served with, men who understood that sometimes, when systems fail, you have to create your own solutions. I found the number I was looking for and dialed. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Darren Hughes speaking." "Darren, it is James Harmon. I need your help." My voice was steady now, resolved. "Remember how we used to clear hostiles from an area without firing a shot?" "I remember." His voice grew serious. "What is happening, James?" "I am under siege, and I need to send a message they will never forget." Darren arrived 2 days later in a nondescript van. After 15 years, he looked older, but his eyes still had that same calculating sharpness I remembered from our deployment days. We had served together in recon, specializing in psychological operations and terrain control. "So these suburban commandos think they can just take your land?" he asked as we walked the property line. I showed him the cut fence, the damaged tractor, the demolished irrigation system. "They are using legal warfare," I explained. "Papers, ordinances, fines, death by 1,000 cuts." Darren nodded thoughtfully. "In the service, we learned that superior force is not always about bigger weapons. Sometimes it is about better theater." We spent that night planning. What emerged was not illegal, not dangerous, but definitely unforgettable. Operation Freedom Field would give the HOA exactly what they feared most, a demonstration that some people cannot be bullied or controlled. First, we filed all the necessary paperwork: agricultural pest control permits, temporary noise variants for wildlife deterrent testing, airspace notification for low-altitude drone operation, even a smoke effects permit for agricultural film production. Everything documented, everything legal. Next came the hardware. Darren's van contained an impressive array of equipment: professional-grade drones equipped with speakers and smoke dispensers, military surplus sonic deterrent devices, completely non-harmful but impressively loud, weather-resistant speakers that could be hidden throughout the property. "Remember that village evacuation in Khorasan?" Darren asked as we positioned equipment. "No shots fired, but they cleared out in 10 minutes flat." I remembered. The combination of unexpected noise, controlled smoke, and strategic positioning had created the illusion of a much larger force. It was textbook psychological operations. We worked through the night setting up our defenses. By dawn, Operation Freedom Field was ready. Warning signs were posted at every entry point to my property. "Caution! Agricultural defense system testing in progress. Authorized personnel only." At precisely 9:00 a.m., right when the HOA demolition team was scheduled to arrive, the first vehicles appeared on my access road. 3 white SUVs with the Meadowbrook logo, followed by a truck pulling a small bulldozer. Clarissa emerged from the lead vehicle, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 men in hard hats. They ignored the warning signs, of course. Power-drunk people always do. I stood on my porch, watching through binoculars as they approached the barn. Darren was in position near the equipment shed, remote controls ready. "Remember," he had said during our planning, The goal is not to harm, but to create an unforgettable message. Fear is temporary. The memory of being afraid in a place will last forever. As the demolition team began unloading equipment near my barn, I gave the signal. Darren pressed the first button. It began with a deep, thrumming sound, bass speakers hidden around the property, creating a vibration you felt in your chest before your ears registered it. The HOA team froze, looking around for the source. Next came the drones. 3 of them rose simultaneously from different locations, each emitting a high-pitched whine that harmonized with the bass thrumming into an unsettling chord. They flew in precise patterns, just as we had programmed them. Smoke canisters activated next, releasing thick white plumes that billowed dramatically across the field, channeled by the morning breeze exactly as we had calculated. The combination created a surreal, otherworldly scene, like a military operation unfolding in slow motion. The sonic deterrents came last, directing focused waves of sound toward the intruders. Not painful, but intense enough to make normal conversation impossible and induce a profound sense of vulnerability. Through my binoculars, I watched Clarissa's composure crumble. Her perfectly maintained facade of authority collapsed as she dropped her clipboard and ran for her vehicle. The video went viral within hours. Darren had positioned cameras strategically to capture every moment. The HOA's unauthorized entry, their dismissal of clearly posted warning signs, and their panicked retreat in the face of completely legal agricultural defensive measures. The footage was edited simply, split screen showing Clarissa's previous invasions of my property alongside her frantic escape from harmless smoke and noise. The caption read, "HOA tries to bulldoze 70-year family farm, farmer responds with legal defense test." Local news picked it up first. Controversial HOA tactics exposed in Mill Creek land dispute. By evening, regional outlets were running the story. By the next morning, national accounts were sharing the video with captions like, "David versus Goliath, farmers' ingenious stand against HOA overreach." My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Fellow farmers called to congratulate me. Even strangers left messages of support. The memes started appearing online by noon. Images of Clarissa running through smoke with captions like HOA Karen meets Farm Force 1, and when you bring a clipboard to a drone fight. One particularly popular edit showed her clipboard flying as she ran with the text, "HOA fines, $275 day. Tractor repair, $1,200. The look on her face, priceless." County officials, suddenly finding themselves in the spotlight, called an emergency meeting. I attended, accompanied by Darren and a lawyer friend of his who specialized in property rights. The room was packed with farmers, reporters, and angry Meadowbrook residents who had just discovered their HOA dues were being used to harass neighboring properties. Commissioner Wilson, who had approved the original rezoning, looked uncomfortable at the podium. In light of recent events and community feedback, the Commission has decided to review Ordinance 247B regarding forced annexation of properties into community associations. Translation: they were backing down. Clarissa was not present, but her lawyer attempted to file an injunction against me for creating a public disturbance. It was quickly dismissed when our permits and documentation were presented. Every drone flight, every smoke canister, every sound effect had been properly registered and approved. Your client entered private property after ignoring clearly posted warning signs during a scheduled agricultural defense system test, my lawyer stated for the record. If anything, the HOA endangered their own personnel through negligence. The tide had turned. By the end of the week, 3 things happened that marked the victory. First, the county board unanimously voted to rescind the controversial portions of Ordinance 247B, creating clear boundaries between HOA jurisdiction and private agricultural land. Second, 2 county commissioners with ties to Meadowbrook development resigned, citing personal reasons that everyone understood were connected to the embarrassing exposure of their favoritism. Third, and most satisfying, a group of veterans from 3 counties over arrived at my farm one morning. They called themselves the Property Rights Protection Team and offered to help restore my damaged fences and irrigation system. Within 2 days, 30 men and women had repaired everything the HOA had destroyed. One grizzled Marine shook my hand as they finished work on the barn. "What you did here matters beyond this farm," he said. "Every day, people like us come home to find that the freedom we fought for is being eroded by petty tyrants with rule books. You showed them there are lines they cannot cross." Frank Tolliver stopped by with a bottle of his homemade blackberry wine. "They came to my place yesterday," he said with a grin, "all polite now, saying there had been a miscommunication about jurisdiction. Funny how a little publicity changes attitudes." The most surprising call came from a real estate attorney in the city. 3 Meadowbrook homeowners have contacted me about filing a class action against their HOA for misuse of funds and exceeding authority. They saw the video. They want to know if you will provide a statement. I agreed immediately. The morning frost covered the new fence posts like powdered sugar. 6 months had passed since Operation Freedom Field. Winter had come to the farm, quieting the fields, slowing the pace. I watched my breath form clouds in the cold air as I made my morning rounds. The new gate stood tall at the entrance to my property, custom welded by a veteran who refused payment. Beside it, a carefully carved wooden sign read, "Private land, no HOA zone." Below that, in smaller letters, "Agricultural operations protected under County Ordinance 52F." Ordinance 52F was the new regulation passed unanimously by the county board, informally known as the Harmon Rule. It explicitly protected agricultural properties from community association overreach and established clear procedures for resolving boundary disputes. Clarissa Trent had quietly resigned her position as Meadowbrook HOA president 3 weeks after the incident. Rumor had it she had moved to Arizona. The new leadership had taken a remarkably different approach, focusing on actual community building rather than expansion. The class action lawsuit filed by Meadowbrook residents had revealed some uncomfortable truths. HOA funds had been used for legal maneuvers against neighboring properties without proper disclosure to members. Several board members had financial interests in devaluing surrounding farmland for future development. The settlement included significant reforms and transparency requirements. As I walked past the barn, I paused to appreciate its weathered beauty. The structure had stood for 70 years, through storms both natural and man-made. I had added just one thing, a flagpole beside it, flying my grandfather's American flag that had draped his coffin at his funeral. The previous weekend, neighbors had gathered in that barn for the first annual Freedom Harvest celebration. Families from both the farms and the subdivisions had come together, sharing food, music, and conversation. Children from Meadowbrook had marveled at the chickens and goats. Their parents had asked questions about growing vegetables and raising livestock. Bridges were being built, not through forced uniformity, but through mutual respect for differences. The media attention had faded, as it always does, but the impact remained. 2 counties over, A similar conflict had been resolved peacefully after local officials watched what had happened here. A state representative had contacted me about testifying for a bill protecting agricultural heritage properties. My tractor, repaired and running smoothly again, sat ready for spring planting. The irrigation system had been upgraded with help from fellow farmers. Even my mailbox had returned to its rightful place, this time anchored in concrete with steel reinforcement. Some battles are symbolic. Some victories need to be visible. As I completed my morning rounds and headed back to the house, I thought about what my grandfather would say if he could see how things had unfolded. He had always told me that land was more than dirt and grass. It was principle made physical. It was independence you could walk on. I think he would be proud, not just of saving the farm, but of changing the conversation, of standing firm when standing firm mattered. In the distance, a car slowed as it passed my property. A young couple with 2 children looked out the window at the farm. They waved. I waved back. They were new to Meadowbrook, part of the changing community. Yesterday, they had stopped to ask if I would be selling eggs again this spring. I told them the chickens were already increasing production as the days lengthened. The soil beneath my boots was frozen now, waiting for spring's thaw. But come April, it would warm again. Seeds would sprout. Work would intensify. The eternal cycle would continue unbroken. That was the true victory. Not just defending a piece of property, but preserving a way of life. A reminder that some things should not be bulldozed in the name of progress. Some roots run too deep to be casually torn away. The gate stands open to friends, but it will never close for good, not on my watch.